people who are open, willing, and driving to change themselves, to improve society. That's a rare talent. And you're effectively producing those. It's great.
Probably the key part for most people is understanding. And it's understanding what is actually happening, understanding its impact for you. Like I say, maybe it's not going to cost you your job. Maybe we're all too fearful. Maybe there'll be new jobs coming. And that's the research indicates certain jobs are taken away by technology. What often happens is many more jobs are created. We no longer have 100 machinists sat there doing their individual work. We have a robot that does it perfectly every time. But that took time to come in, to embed.
We talk about robots in the home, and I say to people when I've got an audience, put your hands up if you've got a robot in the house. And then I call everybody who doesn't have their hand up a liar, because they've got a washing machine, they've got a tumble dryer, they've got a dishwasher. They might not have a robot vacuum, but they've got robots and automation in their life everywhere.
Absolutely,
and it just becomes part of the normality.
Hi, I'm Freya. Welcome to the Skynet Chronicles, Business in the AI Age, the podcast that dives deep into the world where artificial intelligence meets business. Join us as we explore the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities in this ever-evolving landscape. From innovative startups to established enterprises, we'll uncover the secrets behind the successful integration of AI technologies. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and get ready to unlock the mysteries of business in the AI age.
Good morning, Harry, and welcome to the Skynet Chronicles.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim.
So we've got our swearing out of the way, so
Absolutely.
We should now be good. Tell me a bit about Salute My Job.
Okay, so Salute My Job is a veteran-owned and forces-focused company. It has three main strands, and I think it's worth talking about the two that I'm not involved in as much, just before I launch into my own. So the two areas that I don't take much part in are search and recruitment, but it's specifically with military personnel or former military, and so clients tend to be from the defence sector, looking for specialist skills. There's a nascent consulting side of the business, which is looking to help Armed Forces Covenant signatories understand the social mobility and value that they bring through their action with the Armed Forces community, which may assist them in making better, more effective bids at government level. And then there's the Pathways Programme, and I am the Pathways Programme Manager, so I feel like I should talk about that. And this is the part of the business which seeks to improve veteran employability, improve skills, and give people who already have some really good, solid backgrounds in management or leadership and operational delivery extra strings to their bow or the ability to break into a new sector. Yeah. And so this year, specifically, we are delivering a series of training opportunities with specific grant funding from Nominet. And for those viewers unaware, Nominet oversee the UK TLD. And if TLD means nothing, go look it up. But yeah, Nominet have a remit to support educational activities. And so they've partnered with higher education institutions up and down the country with a range of different programs. And Abertay University in Dundee bid and were successful in obtaining grant funding for this project. They approached Salute My Job, with whom they had run a pilot in penetration testing last year, and said, would you partner with us on the delivery of this program? And here we are. So I guess that begs the question, what exactly is this program? It is a series of training opportunities for the veteran community predominantly, but we also open it to those in the reserves, those entering resettlements are coming out of the armed forces, and spouses to all. And that's quite a big demographic that often gets overlooked. Yeah. Abertay run courses for us in penetration testing, artificial intelligence, and governance and policy within cybersecurity. Each of these is around 8 weeks long, and they're all delivered remotely. No one has to go to Dundee if they don't want to.
It's a nice part of the world.
It is a nice part of the world. It's just very far away for most of us. We support that in three primary ways. Number one, the attraction piece. So we promote the courses and we vet candidates coming through for their suitability and eligibility for the courses. We partnered with IBM, with whom Salute My Job has a long-standing relationship. to deliver preparatory learning, especially for the penetration testing and the artificial intelligence courses, which are the more technical of the three. So learners, if they enroll with us, will go through a preparatory session with IBM, a series of self-directed, self-paced videos and exercises to work through. Then they get to Abate and they take over the delivery of learning through their own portal. And then the third area where we help is in employer partnerships. And that's probably why we're sat here today, because you are indeed an employer partner of Salute My Job. But what does that really mean in itself? We're looking for businesses that are able to give something back, but it's a very loosely defined something.
Yeah.
It can be as little as your time in participating in one of our webinars. It could be mentoring and guiding specific students of ours who want to know more about a particular area. It could be the offer of paid or unpaid internships. And at the very top end, it could be the offer of work writ large. And so those are the areas that we're helping support this program.
I think for me, finding highly motivated talent is one of the biggest challenges in running business. Finding the right people to work with. And you can do it in a multitude of different ways. And we were chatting recently with somebody and we were talking about sort of effectively micro tests and having moonlight jobs where people are being evaluated on a very, very finite piece of work. And then maybe another piece. And if they do well, then you consider them for employment. And finding those people that are driven, that want to make a difference, that have that adaptability of mind, is really difficult. So working with an organisation like yours, it opens our horizons to more of the people that are passionate, driven, they're looking to make a difference in the world.
Absolutely.
And they've already demonstrated that they're eager to learn more because they're taking on additional learning.
And that's one of the things we actually asked them about in the vetting process is, what are your motivations, your aspirations beyond the course? And for some people, I should say not all of the people coming through us need a job right now. Some of them are happily employed. This is another string to their bow. We're happy to help them on that journey of development. Others definitely do want to be employed, and specifically in cyber or cybersecurity, they just have no idea how to get into that.
Yeah.
And so, but it is definitely one of the things we ask is, what do you want from this? And where they say, oh, I'd love to go into X, Y, Z, that's where we try and tap into the employer partners that we're developing to say, actually, we do have someone halfway local to you, if that matters. I know a lot of people work remotely, but if location is important, we take that as well. And then try and connect people directly to that employer, not necessarily even with the ambition of getting them a job per se, but just
that
getting
bit of work
experience.
It's priceless, isn't it?
It's about having a portfolio and the ability to say you did something with the skill that you gained. And for some people, like I say, that's not the be all and end all. For some people, it really is just about the skill gain. And then they can say, I can code in basic Python, or I understand how an artificial network, or a convoluted neural network comes to be, or I can do some basic hacking, and I'm happy with that. But for a lot of the people who are serious about breaking into a new sector, and I hear it a lot, especially in the slightly older veteran demographic, say 40 plus, where...
That means I'm old.
No, it's slightly. But I'm nearly there. They say, I've done a lot of manual labor. I've done a lot of physical work. I'm still in some physical work, perhaps. And they see this as not just a mentally challenging and rewarding area to be in, but also one that future-proofs them out into their 60s, let's say, because it's a less physically demanding and less geographically located, sort of tied job. They could perform it from almost anywhere and they don't have to move too much. So they're looking out for themselves in the next 20 years in a way that 20-year-old them just wouldn't have thought.
No. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So just before we went on air, you were having a fascinating conversation with your phone.
I was.
Telling your phone to turn off. And we were talking about how any interruption ceased that. So that's an interesting experiment in natural language processing.
Yeah.
In on-device understanding and the benefits of Apple over Google potentially when it comes to devices.
I should say, for the record, I don't use the voice feature on my Apple phone. so I'm not used to it as much as anything. As much as I have problems with my Pixel and its ability to stop passing the voice, I'm also just not that used to it.
We have a game in my house which my son has now ended. He has turned off Siri on his phone because his voice is very similar to my voice. And so I could activate his device with my voice and ask it to do things. And he got sick of this game, so he turned off Siri on his device so that it doesn't listen now, only on push to talk, which is such a shame. I love that game.
You can't reactivate it.
Well,
Or, I mean, you
no,
can.
I could, but that wouldn't be appropriate.
Wouldn't be ethical. Or
He's technically an adult now.
Oh, okay, yeah. And even if you weren't, that would still probably be an invasion of privacy.
Well, no, it's my device. I'm paying for the network. It's using my Wi-Fi.
Okay.
It's pretty much mine still.
Any solicitors watching?
So we also talked about the ability to plan menus, and you were talking about planning a menu with ChatGPT.
Yes.
And where we have the opportunity in our lives to plan the meals that are put in front of us. That's an interesting opportunity. But I suggested that you could take a photo of what's in your fridge and use that photo to produce a potential meal menu.
So using that, yeah, and that's something that hadn't occurred to me at all in my dalliance with ChatGPT. I used a prompt, a text-based prompt, and I think this probably speaks more to how I am as a person, maybe not just generationally, but I thought text-based prompt, I'm good with words, I'll tell it what I want it to do, it will spit out the answer I'm looking for. It had not even occurred to me to put a photo in front of the AI that it could then translate into its own data and make assumptions or inferences from. That just hadn't even crossed my mind.
And it's part of the journey from large language model, words in, words out, to foundational model, which are multimodal, can understand any form in and can communicate any form out. Now, we're not quite seeing video in, video out yet, but it's coming. But audio in, image in, video in, text in, understanding, and then being able to instantly produce an output isn't something that sits naturally with how we understand the world. But when you think, okay, what could I achieve with that?
Yeah.
How could that fit within a process? Which documents within the business are analysed? How can I take additional information and then use that to automate something that would normally be manual and onerous? And it's how you look at these technology advancements to shift and go, okay, well, if we did it in that way, what's now possible? So we could get a phone out now, I push a button and talk to it, have a conversation, and it will talk back to me with full understanding of everything that's going on in the world, with the ability to access and search the internet. And 6 months ago, that would have been pie in the sky.
I don't feel so bad. Now you've said 6 months ago, that wouldn't be pie in the sky. I don't feel so bad for being only 6 months behind the power curve. In my head, I feel actually like I'm more like 5 years behind in how I personally use it. Some of the ideas that you've just come out with there, I think they require a fundamental mindset shift in humans to enable those things to happen, to look at a business in a different way, to look at documents, not just as written material, but as information, and what can we do with information, is a very different way of thinking, I think, to how I think personally, but probably to how a lot of people think or how they envisage their own businesses, and how when they say AI or when we say AI, people conjure up different things. And so you what you've just outlined there, 30-second soundbite of what the world could be like, I think is going to be alien to 90% of people sat at their desks right now.
I think it's far higher than 90%.
Maybe.
I think people are on this adoption curve with AI and with all technology, and moving people up that curve, increasing their understanding, exposing them to more potential. It's gradual. Some people want to change. Most people are very comfortable in, I turn up for work, I do this between this time and this time, I have a break here, I come back to my desk, I spend that time in the afternoon doing these things. Wait a minute, you're writing up minutes from a meeting. You're sharing those minutes on a tracker that you're emailing to people. Why? when you can have an AI attend the meeting, produce a full transcript of everything, extract the actions, extract who they're for, put those to a task tracker and have that entire process automated. And yet within the majority of businesses, they're like, what? And yet, you can do it that quickly.
So I think you're not wrong. And actually one of my colleagues does use an AI note taker for our meetings. I haven't personally seen the output from this, but that's not the point. The thing sits there as an extra attendee and takes notes. And I guess at some point something happens with those notes. I think what you might be touching on technologically is fascinating. But there's immediately in my head several reasons why people are reticent, not least of all the person whose job it is to transcribe and check and send those things out. What will I do with those extra 3 hours in my day? Can I justify 3 hours of extra work?
What could you do with those extra 3 hours?
Well, I don't know. It depends what they've been hired to do. And this is where the big rethink is necessary before we start writing off necessarily, tens of thousands of people's jobs or hours thereof. And then take that away and give it to AI, I think have to consider carefully what the impact is on the individual as much as on the business. And I get it, improved efficiency in that one area, great. But if that one area has just taken away, 30% of so-and-so's job, that's a big impact for a lot of so-and-so's across the world.
But if the organizations decide, I'm not going to do that, and all of their competitors do.
Yeah.
And they reduce their cost basis potentially, or they're able to use people to create new innovations within their business that they just didn't have time to think about before. Those businesses that decide, oh no, we're going to stick with the way we've always done it. We're going to put our head in the sand. We're not going to worry about this technology. It doesn't make a difference to us. All of a sudden they're going to become obsolete.
No, I get that. And I think if I can remember back a minute ago, I don't think I said that exactly.
I'm playing.
No, absolutely. And so I don't think I said we have to consider it carefully.
Yeah.
And so in that careful consideration, it comes back to what you said. What could they be doing? What other skills do they need to be doing other things in that time, which is now their own? And there is part of me which says that some people will actually enjoy transcribing and note-taking and doing a piece of physical work with the information, listening things through and typing away. They'll gain some kind of human enjoyment out of that. So It might not be business efficient, but it might be keeping someone happy. And I think, again, back to the consideration of individuals, you have to look at each person in some way and say, why is that still going on? Is it because they didn't know about the technology and they haven't adopted it? Or are there other factors at play? And the other thing, which has just occurred to me sort of while I've been thinking about this over the last few days, is whether or not there's a very early, because AI is in its early stages of being really good as we see it now. Obviously, we can't tell what really good's going to look like in 10 years.
It's rubbish at the minute.
but it's still really good compared to 6 months ago.
Yep.
There's a lot of reliance already from people who have adopted various AI things on it being very correct all of the time. So with note-taking, for example, I saw some AI transcribed subtitles the other day. And actually, most of it was pretty good. But there were a few words that sound similar, but are very different. So the difference between upskill and upscale are two very different things. And it had misattributed that to the person's speech. And again, dealing with accents and dealing with different patterns of speech and so on. It's not perfect. And so there is still an element, I think, for a human eye, especially if we want to be in the detail. And so not to be too hastily reliant on AI, I think is worth consideration.
Absolutely.
And just to consider, the impact it brings, good and bad.
The argument we always make is this is not to replace a person in a process, but if you can get an output to 80-90% complete almost instantly, and then have an expert check that, that puts you in a really solid position because you're accelerating the process, you're taking out the lower value elements of the work, and you're allowing them to focus on making sure it's right, having that level of expertise, and then either using that time that's become available to create more output, to do more site visits, to write more code, to have more conceptual time, whatever that potential item is within the industry, but you're taking them to that point of much closer to complete and then having human in the loop to finish the process.
Yeah.
So it's still human moderated. It's still value add from the time that they're spending on it, but it's not masses and masses of time taken on something that can be automated.
Yeah, and by that logic, there's no real difference other than the human interaction part between that and many other areas of life over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Where, we've taken away the need to do so, assembly lines. We no longer have 100 machinists sat there doing their individual work. We have a robot that does it perfectly every time. But that took time to come in.
It did.
To embed,
we talk about robots in the home, and I say to people when I've got an audience, put your hands up if you've got a robot in the house. And then I call everybody who doesn't have their hand up a liar, because they've got a washing machine, they've got a tumble dryer, they've got a dishwasher. They might not have a robot vacuum, but they've got robots and automation in their life everywhere.
Absolutely,
and it just becomes part of the normality. And it's looking and seeing how that change happens and how we help people on the journey towards adoption so that they're comfortable with technology change and able to benefit from it without raising pitchforks and setting fire to things.
I think in the comfort zone, so getting to that point, probably the key part for most people is understanding. And it's understanding what is actually happening. Back end, maybe not in depth, but how did that decision come to be? How has that thing made that output? Understanding its impact for you, like I say, maybe it's not going to cost you your job. Maybe we're all too fearful. Maybe there'll be new jobs coming. And that's the research indicates that although certain jobs are taken away by technology, what often happens is many more jobs are created. They're just not the same ones. You can't tell what they're going to be because none of us can see the future.
No, but if you went back 3 years and you were a copywriter and you said, okay, you're still writing copy, but you're going to be creating prompts and then finessing the output of those prompts. Like, what? But copywriting is becoming prompt engineering effectively in quite a lot of areas, where it's just refining the way that you ask a model something in order to produce a high quality output to accelerate that creative process.
But people need to understand that, I think. Is that understanding? Where's that come from? I think some of what we've been speaking about has been a little on the banal side. Copywriting, let's say. You write a bunch of text for an organization. Chances are, unless you're dealing with some very, very specialist stuff, you're not going to write something that's going to kill someone. But in the future, if AI spreads into more and more domains, there is a chance that, and it's probably happening now, you'll tell me, that AI is in use and across the board in use in industries where, death as a result of the AI decision might be possible.
Might be the intention of
it. Might be the
industry.
intention, sure, but I'm thinking, I'm not thinking quite to that length. I'm thinking more about industries where, for example, if we took medicine, for example, if the AI were allowed to make a decision as to whether someone had cancer or not, based on the information that it had, you could argue till you're blue in the face, a bit like we do with AI driving, that it's actually statistically a lot safer than a doctor, or safer than the other drivers on the road. It makes far fewer mistakes. Statistically, it makes far fewer errors. The only difference being when someone crashes into me or a doctor makes the wrong decision about my health based on the information they had, I have another human to place my anger or grief or distress upon.
And legal cases upon.
And there is some ramification for that individual, usually. Whereas one cannot punish the AI. What do you do? Turn its power off for 5 minutes until it's been a naughty computer?
No, but you can still go to the shareholders of the organization that built that AI and that maintained it. So if you look at driving and you look at the full self-driving models from Tesla, then, first of all, they're probably the biggest robotics company on the planet. They've got robots everywhere pulling in data and feeding back to a computer. And if one of their vehicles is involved with a crash and causes a fatality, then ultimately that company, that entity can be sued.
Sure, but Elon Musk isn't going to prison for causing death by dangerous driving, but because of one of his vehicles making an error on the road. And I think, and that's an element, and it's nothing I get hung up on, by the way, but it's an element of consideration. Right now we're talking about things where, for the most part, it's relatively inconsequential. Relatively, what we're using AI for. The examples we've spoken about this morning, that the most useful things in our day-to-day life are not the things that kill people, or have that ramification associated. And I just think, again, it comes back to understanding, but it comes back to having these considerations of the frameworks that need to be in place to adequately integrate these things, adequately integrate AI. Anyway, that's off the cuff. You can have that.
I like that. Yeah, it's interesting. I think when you look back at the Moderna vaccine, they evaluated millions of combinations through AI and selected candidates and fast-tracked those. And then they were guinea pig tested on society at large. And we don't really know the impact of those. So there may come a point where at some point, some of the entities behind those decisions have blame. And if we look back historically against the application of medicine and mandates by government levels, there's generally long-standing court cases that go on decades.
Yeah.
There will be issues, there will be fallout. But without it, what might have happened?
And that's what I was going to say. In support of Moderna, not that I particularly know much about it, but we know what would have happened if we did nothing. Because we saw what happened when we were unable to do anything for the first 6 to 12 months of the pandemic. So to do nothing, I think, was not an option. Whether or not, as you say, whether or not it was the best option, whether or not it had ramifications about which we're unaware.
This was the right decision at the time with the data that was available.
Absolutely.
And that's all you can make decisions on.
Yeah, but as I say, when a human does it, when a human makes a decision to do something like that, with the data they have available, we have this innate understanding that it was a human that made something that was fallible. I just think maybe there's an over-eager sort of eagerness to embrace AI fully as it comes, without considering these things, because most of the time it works just fine.
I think there's a huge broad spectrum, and I think in some areas people are leaping forward, in others very cautious. And if you analyze a population level, generally still very, very cautious and pessimistic. And despite all of the news and press and coverage, very early days in terms of AI adoption and in terms of the capabilities that are coming and how they're actually going to make a difference to the world. This is going to have a greater impact than electricity.
Right.
But when and under what circumstances and to what eventual outcome?
And do we have the electricity to support it?
Well, I mean, there's arguments to say that these innovations will actually solve that problem.
Okay. Yeah.
But who knows? We've had predictive AI. We're now very squarely in Gen AI. There are some options and some availabilities demonstrating inventiveness, truly unique thinking, and how that unique thinking is applied to problems that man hasn't solved yet.
Yeah.
To help move the needle, where that takes technology, how we solve energy production, and how we keep these data centers cool, given that they consume vast amounts of water currently.
Yeah, underwater data centers.
There have been some experiments on it.
Well, you say experiments. I think China's moving to use them extensively. And I
have
believe,
you seen the impact of salt water on metal?
Well,
there's definitely some work to be done.
Depends on the metal, surely. I'm sure there are ways of protecting them, but I think actually the biggest issue that it raised in the articles I read about it was actually to do with access. If something goes wrong, you can't just go and swap out one server for another because it's several thousand feet away from you and surrounded by water. You might as well stick it out in space at that point.
So what excites you with technology at the moment?
So you're going to have to edit this.
No, I don't think we are. I like ums and ahs.
You like ums and ahs?
Let's be more specific. What excites you about technology in terms of the experience for the veterans that are coming through Salute My Job?
Okay.
You're focused very specifically on giving niche skills in highly technical areas. And I think that to me is hugely exciting.
Yeah. So for the veteran community or the forces community, since, spouses, for example, aren't veterans themselves, but the forces community writ large, what excites me about this and then the prospects that we're able to offer, it's an ability to tap into something new and growing. So there's obvious prospects within the sector. It doesn't look like it's going to fall over and die anytime soon. It's an opportunity to be at the forefront of that for a lot of people. And we spoke before about, people who want to move away from, say a more physical demanding lifestyle as they get older and into something more cerebral and, where they can have just as much impact, but in a very different way. So for all these reasons, it's quite exciting. I think it also speaks volumes to the security. This is probably why we hang our peg on cybersecurity as much as anything else. The mindset is the same. It's just the application is different.
Yeah.
Physical security, cybersecurity, info security, whatever you want. That idea of protection, that idea of finding the loopholes and fixing them, that idea of making things better, that I had something here and now by the end of the day, it's a better thing. I think that speaks and resonates very well with the military community writ large. I think there's a whole ethos of that in the community. I say that as someone who served as well, so I'm biased. But that to me is probably why this is attractive for them, and why it makes sense for them. That's not to say that necessarily everything in cyber or in cybersecurity is for every member of the armed forces community. It's a broad church at both sides. But there's something in there for everyone, I feel, if it's the hacking side and you get your kicks from finding vulnerabilities in a system and you're willing to invest in the technical understanding behind that to then explain to a client what goes on. If it's the AI side and you're willing to invest in a technical, delve into coding and work out how does one program actually result in an output that another can use and do it from a back end perspective. Some of our people come to this with no knowledge of coding at all, and over a 12-week period become quasi proficient in a coding language.
They go beyond that. I think that program is very well designed. It takes them to quite a significant level of Python development very quickly. And to be successful on that program means you've got to have had the right mindset to start with.
And I think they do. If not the mindset, then at least the motivation. And I think one can overcome the other.
Absolutely.
So they might not quite know what they're getting into, but if they're sure they want to get into it, then they'll jump those hurdles. And the final one which we offer at the moment, the governance and policy. Now that's non-technical. It's plain English, but it requires you to understand some basic concepts and to then apply them into real world. And this is real world scenarios with real people. And this is where we branch away maybe from the tech, but how do people use tech? What's the point in having multi-factor authentication if no one updates their passwords every X months? What's the point in having keycard access if you just let the person behind you tailgate? And so on and so forth. And so educating people on those things and on the fact that regulatory frameworks even exist to support those things. I think these are all the exciting things, for the community we serve. And as it turns out, I have thought of something, which is halfway exciting for myself, although it's exciting in not the way that you might think. It comes back to something we spoke about earlier about the use of AI to speak multiple languages. So with one model, you can communicate your message to 30 different countries' residents or more, because they can speak 30 plus languages innately. As a linguist, I find that very exciting. I also find it slightly depressing as a linguist because, again, come back to the human interaction, the human want to be involved and the human want to do. If someone else can just do it, that there is a tendency in humans to just let the machine do it.
And I think that does open up more possibilities for us, though, because if you were sat watching Star Trek growing up, seeing the universal translator and thinking, that's just nuts. We've basically got a universal translator now.
And it is nuts.
And what does that open up? What more potential is there? The conversations that we can have with people that we wouldn't have been able to do before. That's really fascinating. It's how do we open the world up by language not being a problem anymore?
Okay, yeah, no, and it is exciting. It's just there's a part of me. It's the old part of me, that did all the language learning himself and didn't have an AI to do it for him. That says, in some cases, and especially now because it's such a nascent technology, in some cases you can't bring AI to bear. There's no internet, there's no technology in that location. And I know you're thinking there's very few places like that.
No, I'm not. They're everywhere. But what I'm thinking actually is how quickly it's going to all be on device.
Yeah, that's true. Again, exciting and scary in equal measure.
Yeah.
I think there's, when we talk about things on the device as well, you just I jump down rabbit holes with things about, the assurance and the confidentiality of my data and how the device stores it or shares it, either or how can that be accessed? And what does it tell someone about me? And it might just tell them what the content of my fridge is. But even that might be revealing depending on what's in my fridge.
I think there's a difference between on device and effectively open information. If it's solely on device, nothing's leaving the device, and that device is authenticated and locked, then it's your data on something that's in your possession. If somebody else gets possession of it, they can't access your data.
But there is not even growing, there is a reliance on cloud technology and sharing one's data.
There is, and we're not at that point where everything's solely on device yet.
No. Well, far from it. That's my point. Actually, people have embraced cloud technology and sharing, without contemplating necessarily what the cloud is. Sounds great. It's someone else's computer,
Someone else's massive computer.
Exactly. Oh yeah, but that's what it is. And but we're at a point where we've embraced that societally, to a certain degree. Unless you're me and you don't talk to your phone.
I've just seen you talk to your phone.
I told it to power off. I could tell it to do other things. But most people will store voice notes. They'll communicate directly into their phone and ask it questions, and that question itself is being codified and integrated and uploaded somewhere.
Potentially used for training data.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Or in your case, to turn your son's devices on and off. But yeah, it's I'm not a naysayer by any stretch. I just have lots of questions. When we talk about the future of this.
Very healthy, because nobody knows the future.
No.
We can't foresee 18 months, 2 years out, really. Got a pretty good understanding up to 12 months out. But the impact of the technology that's coming on board and how that will change society as a whole. If you look back at the dot-com bubble, where there was huge investment, everything crashed, and it still fundamentally changed the world. The level of change we're having from building intelligence that can operate autonomously as agents that can perform actions for us, the impact of that's going to be so fundamental to society.
Yeah.
It might not come immediately. It might not be a smooth transition, but we're creating the ability to do things that are unfathomable to us currently. And we don't really know where it's going to go.
And that, coming back to the Salute My Job mission, that's an exciting place for our people to be at.
Absolutely.
And to have this opportunity to get into it entirely for free, I should say. Is
sign up now.
Well, yeah. Well, if you're part of the community, yeah, absolutely. And if you're not, there's other programs up and down the country. So it's opportunity writ large. It is interesting, and it's like, I think actually having come back to what you said about having the right people getting into it, the right motivations and the right ability to question or to bring some other experience to the table, and to have a healthy skepticism, maybe.
I think that's brilliant.
Is useful in all domains, and that's probably where this particular program works best, is that we do have those people. They know to question, they know to ask the right questions, they also know when to just get on with doing the job, and they're happy to pivot.
And they're keen to learn and are motivated to change, and they're rare things in society as a whole.
I find that really surprising, to hear you say those are rare qualities.
I think so. I think people like
I live in a
doing
bubble.
their normal. They like turning up, doing what they do. People who are open, willing, and driving to change themselves, to improve society. That's a rare talent, and you're effectively producing those. It's great.
Well, we're waiting for them to come to us, but yeah, the military did a good job of producing them, and we're just tapping into that. Yeah,
the military is giving a certain set of skills, and then they're one way or another ready to learn new skills, aren't they?
absolutely. I think for your audience who may not be familiar with the military writ large, actually skills progression and development is huge within it.
Yeah.
You can't progress up your respective ladders without attending at least several, mandatory training courses. And those are just the ones that, help you understand leadership and management and get into those positions of promotion power.
Yeah.
But the technical training, the skills you need to be an effective commander in a different, niche environment, or the tools you need to learn to use. It's just one, I used to send soldiers on training courses lasting up to 18 months. 18 months of training once they had already done several years in the field.
Yeah.
Just to gain confidence and skills in a new piece of equipment or a new discipline. And the army was willing to invest in that. 18 months of training. Part and parcel. And that was just your day job.
Yeah.
That's before you go on operations. That's before you do it. So actually, I think the mindset is probably not abnormal in the forces community. Slightly depressing to hear it might be abnormal elsewhere.
I think that just creates opportunity.
I think for us, yeah.
If the general level of society is a reluctance to change and adapt, and you're effectively harnessing, growing learners who are desperate to get into businesses and make an impact and want to learn new skills, you're creating future leaders, future technicians, future champions in industry.
I really hope so.
I think so. I think it's excellent. I think there should be more of it.
I can't disagree with that. I should say we're not working in isolation. There are other organisations in similar sphere doing similar things in similar ways. I can't speak for exactly what they do because I don't know their programs in and out. But
we're not here to talk about their programs.
No, of course not. But
it's all about you.
But there are others doing similar stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a recognised source, I think, of talent.
Yeah.
I think probably the biggest barrier isn't that we have the talent and we've got to get it to come to us and be motivated. The biggest barrier is in getting other people to understand that we, members of the armed forces community, are not automatons. We are not robots. We don't just follow orders. We don't bark and shout much. It's overcoming those really old myths and misperceptions of what the forces are in society writ large. Where we find the biggest struggle. But with this specific program, the biggest hurdle is just getting people experience, like you said at the beginning, of that portfolio.
Yeah.
Something to say that they
did a thing.
I did a thing, yeah. But I did a thing with the skill I just got.
Yep.
The Abertay University course is very good at giving them practice. So the final submission in both the AI and the pen testing course is to write a report on a program that they either wrote themselves or on a system that they hacked.
Yep.
And the governance and policy, they write a policy brief to demonstrate. So that will give them their first piece of...
kind of the grounding, isn't it?
Yeah.
But actually getting a bit of industry experience where they can say,
doing it for real.
I took that and I made this, or I applied it here, or I broke this for this company. Even if I can't say which company, maybe it's
Absolutely.
a leading blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter.
No,
Having
not at
that on a CV is the difference between just a qualification and demonstrated practical.
Especially since they're often not in a position where they can already say they've done 2 years as a SOC analyst or whatever. So some of them are, but the majority are coming at it fresh with, just as you say, the mindset, the attitude. And now how do we get them that foot in the door And that's the question we're seeking to answer.
Right, and good businesses hire for potential. So if you can see that somebody's got that gem, they've got the possibility. And we've hired people who've been bedroom coders. They've just started university and they're working with us through their university courses because we can see that they've got the potential to be amazing professionals, but they already outperform almost every developer on the planet. And
They just don't know it.
No, and so it's how you find those gems. And I think programs like yours, you're finding people who are motivated, who've got that gem of potential. And if you can give them enough tests to prove that that particular individual is going to be a great benefit to my business or to somebody else's business, that's winning.
I hope so. And I hope they also get that sense of achievement, sort of not just through completing the course, but if we can find them these opportunities, that they can have that self-belief. Yeah. Because I think it's all well and good. We've got the motivation, we've got the mindset, and they may have done a thing. But I suppose they also need that validation. Yeah. That they have done a thing and it was good. Yeah.
That positive reinforcement.
Not just I said it was good, but the company I did it for or worked with is willing to endorse it. That's where we're making those baby steps towards, what we're trying to change.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
What a great point to end the podcast. So thank you very much for your time today, Harry. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to working with Project Rising in the future.
We look forward to it too.
Great.